Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. You've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail. Today, we're going to be talking about what would happen if Deku had the Lord's eyes. And just to let you know, today's video is 100% fueled by that 12 p.m. motivation. So you already know this one's going to be a banger. With that being said, today's video is a movie, so there's not a particular like goal, but let's still try to go for about 1,000 likes since your boy went crazy on this one. That being said, let me know down below what your favorite part of this video was and comment your attendance down below. That being said, enjoy. All right. So it's currently 12:45 at night, and I figured, hey, instead of laying down in bed being bored, endlessly scrolling through Instagram Reels or TikTok, I figured, let me record a video for you guys. Another My Hero Academia movie, seeing as I just dropped the Gravity Quirk one. But with that being the case, today's video, you guys already probably heard me say it in the intro, you know, Adam, Ragnarok, you guys are already here. Anyways, yeah, today I'm going to be talking about Adam. And for those of you guys that don't know who he is, essentially, he's based off of the biblical character from the Bible. He's pretty much the first human that God made, quote unquote, in this series, Adam of Ragnarok, God, quote unquote. But point being, the dude pretty much has a power that allows him to copy other people's abilities called divine reflection. When it comes to that power, a lot of things about it are sort of unknown because it's kind of speculation. But when I did watch the anime itself, I really enjoyed the fact that this dude could take his opponent's enemy and send it right back. Like, that has always been such a cool freaking flex. Like, your opponent does something and you look at them and go, oh, watch this, I can do it better. I just love that. So I figured, let me take the concept, mind you, concept, not the full, like, perfect thing. This is not going to be a carbon copy of Adam. I'm just going to be taking the concept of it, giving it to Izuku as a quirk. Mind you, it's going to be a quirk. And we're not going to be introducing Adam Ragnarok characters or none of the lore, nothing like that. I was originally going to do this in the script that I had written for this. So I got like 10 minutes into the video, but I didn't like it. So I figured, hey, let me just go off the top and see what happens. So for this specific story, the way that I wanted to set up the quirk for Izuku is that essentially Izuku's going to be having Adam's eyes. So, you know, that's pretty much the thing that allows Adam to have divine reflection, but it does actually have a drawback, which is really interesting when you watch it. And it's the fact that the more difficult or the more straining the thing that he's trying to copy is, the more taxing it is on his body. So copying other people's abilities does tax him. And that was the perfect drawback to this quirk that I was cooking up. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Izuku's going to be having a quirk that's similar to Aizawa, when in use, makes his eyes glow red. Normally his eyes are green, but whenever he's using the ability of divine reflection, his eyes glow red and they just have this really cool look to them. Also, when it comes to Izuku's quirk, it's going to be evolving as time goes on, but in the very beginning, Izuku's essentially going to be having an ability to stockpile quirks. A little bit similar to that, the way that One For All works, but a little bit different at the same time. Izuku can choose three quirks, which he can stockpile into himself, kind of like an inventory. And with that inventory, he can keep that an unlimited amount of time, but say he changes one for another one, then he loses access to that quirk until he sees someone use it again and copies it once more. So Izuku's going to be having divine reflection to the extent that he could literally copy everyone except for mutant quirks. Mutant quirks is something that Izuku's going to be mutant quirks is something that Izuku's not going to be able to copy. So quirks like emitters, like just to give a couple examples, Shoto, Bakugo, Ochako, Shinso, Denji, Enji Todoroki, you know, obviously, you know, Endeavor, they're characters that he could copy the quirks of. But people like Suyu and that one guy like that, he kind of looks like a rock, you know what I mean? And then we got the dude with multi-arms, he can't copy their abilities, or even Tokiyami, because that's actually a mutation quirk, which is kind of crazy. I mean, obviously, like his face. And with that being the case, he also can't copy quirks that alter people's bodies. Something like Hiroshima's hardening, that's not something that Izuku's going to be able to copy. Or, you know, Tetsu's like metal stuff like that. Or Edge Shot's ability to, like, you know, fold his body and stuff like that. He's not going to be able to copy those abilities. But different quirks that are like accumulation, and it's like a bunch of quirks like Eri, where she can use rewind, and Izuku's One For All, and Fat Comes Fat Absorption, stuff like that is going to be at Izuku's disposal. So those are pretty much going to be the drawbacks of the quirk. And that's how it's going to be working. It's going to be like a quirk that lets him copy certain abilities, and it's going to be having limits, and it's just going to do for such a fun story, in my opinion. Like, as I'm talking about this, I'm just thinking like I'm going to have fun with this video. But with that being the case, let's begin on the day that Izuku discovers his quirk. Much like in the original story of My Hero Academia, Izuku would be in classroom the day that Bakugo would awaken his quirk, and everybody else would have been awakening their quirks. And by everybody else, I mean like Bakugo would unlock his quirk, and more people would begin unlocking theirs. As time would pass, Izuku would be taken to the quirk doctor, where the doctor would actually end up telling Izuku different news, saying that he will have a quirk, but it's probably just taking him a little bit longer. This would ultimately lead to Izuku, going through life for the next couple of months, just like being like, oh, I'll get my quirk. Doctor said I should unlock it sometime soon. And because Izuku was a kid and he didn't exactly come out and outright say, hey, I'm quirkless, Bakugo doesn't just be like, useless Izuku, but he's like, it's taking you so long, Deku. When you get your quirk, we're probably already gonna have mastered ours. Deku's gonna kind of feel bad about the fact that, he is a late bloomer, but bro is not ready for the quirk that he's gonna be inheriting. Anyways, that being the case, Izuku would hang out with Bakugo, and more time would pass, months would pass, and Izuku, the more that he tries to do something, to use his mom's quirk, to shoot out fire from his mouth like his father, the less it seems to work. Izuku starts realizing slowly that he might not even have a quirk, and he's starting to get really, really worried, thinking that maybe the doctor just lied to him to make him feel good about himself. But ultimately, Izuku would not, focus in on that specific thought, and he would continue hanging out with Bakugo. This would lead us to the day when Bakugo and everybody else were like kind of walking on top of a bridge. Bakugo was lighting explosions on his hand. Everybody's just gassing him up, telling him that he's the best, he's the greatest of all time, he's the GOAT, you know what I mean? And Bakugo would just fall off. At this point, Deku would go to reach his hand in to help Bakugo, saying, hey Bakugo, you okay? And Bakugo, seeing Izuku, the kid who hasn't even unlocked his quirk yet, trying to act like they're equals, this would throw him into a rage. Bakugo would slap his hand out of the way and say, get off of me, quirkless Izuku. As Izuku staring at Bakugo would say, but I'm not. As Bakugo would say, you might as well be. It's taking you so long, you might as well be, quirkless Izuku. As he would start making fun of Deku, and this would lead Deku to just like kind of crying. You know what I mean? Eventually, because Deku spends so much time around Bakugo, and Bakugo's constantly flaring his quirk out, one day, Deku would be in class, and after that whole skirmish had happened, he would just see Bakugo use his explosion quirk once, as Deku's eyes would flash red, and for a split second, Deku would pop explosions in his hand as he would think, wait, I have an explosion quirk. This would ultimately lead Izuku to going to the teacher and telling her that he unlocked his quirk. She would say, really, what is it? And Izuku would say, I have an explosion quirk too, which would quickly catch the attention of Bakugo. Bakugo would say, oh yeah, Deku, we'll prove it. And Deku would go to the front of the class and try his absolute best to replicate the feeling, saying, but I'm not lying. And Bakugo would say, pathetic. You want to copy my quirk and act like you have something as great as mine? You'll never have that, Deku. As he would push him onto the ground, and Izuku would fall, just thinking, but I'm not lying. This would eventually lead Izuku down a path of being like, alright, I'll figure out how my own quirk works. He tells his mom about this, and Inko doesn't even believe him, which would end up being a severe blow to Izuku's psyche, and him being like, what, like really, like nobody believes in me? This would ultimately lead Deku to kind of just like dropping his head and saying, I guess no one believes me. As Izuku would realize that if he wants to get stronger with this quirk of his, then he has to work on it on his own. Izuku would pretty much go on to realize that this quirk has something to do with other people's quirks, maybe, or Bakugo. Izuku from this point forward would start watching Bakugo at school every time he would use his quirk, and this would allow Izuku to, in little spurts, have his eyes glow red as he would copy Bakugo's quirk from a distance, blowing off little explosions. This is when the teacher would actually end up using her quirk, which would be a quirk that allows her to stretch her body. Oh wait, no, that's a quirk that falls under the category of let me double check. Yeah, that's like a physical body alteration, so Izuku can't exactly copy that one. Let's think of a different quirk, something more simple. maybe his mom's quirk, maybe let's do that instead. So after Deku goes home from school and he's been practicing this thing, he would see his mom use her quirk to levitate the remote to her, and Izuku watching this would have his eyes glow red as he would begin to levitate a bag of chips towards him. As Izuku's doing this, he would have a huge smile on his face as he would realize that he really can do it. He has a quirk, and he would realize it has to be a copy quirk, right? As Izuku would start to wonder what the limitations to this quirk are. This would lead Izuku to test this theory out at school, and he would try to copy the quirks of mutants, but he would quickly realize that their quirks, it's impossible. He tries one after the other, but the more that he tries, he realizes he just can't copy their quirks. Apparently, it's only emitter quirks. So Izuku over the next couple of years would work on this in secret, literally not telling anybody, as Izuku would have tried to tell his mom, but she's convinced he's quirkless. Izuku would have tried telling the class, but they're all convinced he's quirkless as well. So Izuku's kind of just been growing in secret and staying out of everyone's way. And this time Izuku's not depressed or thinking, oh, I have to give up on my goal. Izuku's straight up just locked in. This would ultimately lead to Izuku getting stronger behind the scenes and him not necessarily knowing the extent of his actual strength, just because of the fact that Izuku hasn't exactly used this to fight with somebody or something like that. Izuku would do a lot of practice with his mother's quirk, and this would eventually lead Izuku to understanding that his quirk might even allow him to not only copy people's abilities, to even enhance them, because Izuku would realize that using his mom's quirk wouldn't actually put any strain on him at all. Even using a more advanced version, lifting heavier options, at least 2 times what his mom could lift, would shock Izuku into realizing that, hey, my quirk's different. This would ultimately lead to a bit of a time skip in which during this time, Izuku would start tinkering with his quirk, learning, the fact that certain quirks can't be copied, other quirks can, and that he has the 3 quirk limit. Izuku at this point would still be a humble kid and would just kind of stay out of everyone's way. He's not popular by any means, but he's also not a loser in this timeline, and he's not trying to be all buddy-buddy with Bakugo because he understands that ship has sailed. This version of Izuku doesn't really need Bakugo in that sort of sense, and he would start changing his perspective on how quirkless society works. Eventually though, Izuku would make it to 6th grade, where on a particular day, just like in the main story of the My Hero Academia timeline, Izuku would actually witness a hero attack, and this specific incident would actually be Endeavor taking out a couple of criminals. Izuku would have seen that with his own eyes, so you already know Izuku quickly copied Endeavor's quirk. This would lead Izuku to making his way to the classroom, writing down a bunch of details of Endeavor's quirk, because that's definitely one of the quirks that Izuku was going to be keeping in his arsenal. I mean, that's the number 2 hero's quirk, and Izuku saw it live, which is the only way he can use quirks. Because bro, I'm not giving this man the ability to just watch things through on TV and he can copy them that way. That's just too busted, you know what I mean? Quirks have limits, and that's one of them. Anyways, that being the case, Izuku would walk into the classroom, and because he's writing down in his notebook, he wouldn't be looking where he's going. This would ultimately lead Izuku to bumping into Bakugo by accident, with Izuku saying, "Oh, Kachan, sorry about that, I was just writing in my notebook," as Bakugo looking up to Izuku would say, "Don't worry about it, pal. We all make mistakes sometimes," and he would put his hand on Izuku's shoulder as he'd begin blaring an explosion on it, and would actually end up burning Deku's jacket with it. This leads Deku to be like, "What the heck, Bakugo?" As Bakugo looks at him and says, "Whoa, looks like his balls dropped. Look at the way he's talking now all of a sudden." As both of Bakugo's goonies, the teacher's still not in the classroom, both of his goons walk over and they're like, "Yeah, it looks like he needs to be taught a lesson. Remember, Deku, you're just a quirkless loser." And Deku would say, yeah, Bakugo. Now can I have my notebook back? As Bakugo would actually grab the notebook and blow it up. At this moment, Izuku would get absolutely triggered, and his eyes would begin glowing red as Bakugo would say, "What the heck? Deku, do you have some sort of quirk or something like that?" As Izuku would say, "Give me the notebook back, Bakugo." And Bakugo would say, "And what if I don't?" As Deku, gritting his teeth, would say, "You asked for this," as he would hold one hand out and flames would shoot out of it towards Bakugo, who would be absolutely stunned and would get sent flying to the back of the classroom. At this point, everybody who was actually there would have seen this happen, and Bakugo would get a blaring explosion shooting towards Deku's direction. And mind you, this is 6th grade Bakugo, not the same one we get in middle school, so his control over his quirk is not exactly the same way that we get in the at UA. So this is a much weaker version of Bakugo, and one whose body still hasn't developed as much. This means that Bakugo would be so much weaker in comparison to Izuku, who has literally been training his body for all these years to try, mind you, not to succeed, but to try to keep up with all these quirks that he's going to be having to control one day. Specifically, one of them being Katsuki's explosion quirk, knowing about the recoil that it has on his arms. Because mind you, it's like shooting a shotgun every time. It's insane. But that being the case, Deku would hold his hands out in front of him, having never actually fought somebody before, and as Bakugo would go to shoot an explosion and the fight would like start to actually commence, Deku would actually end up, the fight would be interrupted by the teacher, who would walk in at the last second saying, "Hey, break it up, there's no fights here at this school." As, you know what I mean, we would pretty much just get Bakugo and Deku getting separated and then being taken to the principal's office. At this point, Bakugo would be allowed to just go free, considering the fact that he has an incredible quirk, and the school has a large bias for him because they're like, oh, he's gonna, you know, get the name out there, like he's gonna become a hero one day, and they're still under the illusion that Izuku's just a quirkless loser. So Izuku's mom actually gets called to the office, and she's told that Izuku tried picking a fight with someone else, and she's just like, what? Like, my Izuku did that? Izuku would literally be sitting there trying to make a case for himself, being like, but mom, I didn't even, and she would look at him disappointed saying, Izuku, you don't have to say anything else. I don't know why you did it, but just don't do it again, Izuku. As, you know, she just looks disappointed the whole car ride home, and Deku's just sitting there just like, but mom, I did, and he just thinks, she didn't believe that I had a quirk. I bet she wouldn't even believe that I told her that Bakugo started that. Burned my notebook, and now I even got suspended. Deku at this point would start getting angry as his eyes start glowing in the back seat, and he would think to himself, frickin' Bakugo, what a piece of garbage. He'd be thinking in the back seat. Mind you, the dude is a middle schooler. Of course, these are the train of thoughts going through his head. So with this, actually, give me a second. I need to take a quick Gatorade break because I'm a little thirsty. Okay, let me get a little bit more. That hit the spot. Oh, actually, before I get into the story, whoever comments first and has a cool profile picture and leaves the comment really cool saying tagging attendance, I'm gonna pin you down below. So report your attendance down below and hit that like button because you guys already know the story is pretty good so far. At least I think. But you know, I have personal bias. Let me know what you guys think about the story so far. But with that being the case, let's get back into the story. Izuku, like I said, the dude's a middle schooler. His thought process is going at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and he would get mad at Bakugo. He's just annoyed. He's like, what the heck? Like, the weak don't even get thought of as anything. Everyone thinks he's quirkless with the exception of all the people that are in the classroom, but when they thought he was, because the teachers thought he was quirkless, they literally let Bakugo get away with beating it, like trying to beat him up in class. And he probably would have even been successful because Deku doesn't have combat training. Yeah, he knows how to use plenty of quirks, but that doesn't mean he can fight yet. This would essentially lead Izuku to being in the back of the car being like, if they respect strength, then I guess I'll just have to get stronger and show everybody that they're wrong. The strong shouldn't crush the weak. They should protect them. This would ultimately lead Izuku's ideals to begin being formed of like, you people need to leave me alone. Eventually, over the course of this break, Izuku would begin working like never before. Mind you, before he would train on his quirk and think, I'm gonna get strong enough for the UA entrance exam. He never thought of himself as greater than someone else because of the fact that he had some copy quirk. Izuku's not that kind of guy, but now Izuku is just starting to change. His view on the world is starting to be formed in a very, very interesting way. As the 2 weeks would finally be over, Izuku would have trained his quirk and gotten even stronger, focusing on using Bakugo's quirk specifically. in tandem with Endeavor's quirk and his mother's quirk, which is another quirk that Izuku loves using just because it's so close to home. Obviously, Izuku has used water emitter quirks. He's been at a couple hero incidents and seen, people who are able to use water quirks, like that one guy who can create like who can shoot water out of his hands and stuff like that. What else? I don't know. Let's just take a pause there and let me like regain my thoughts. Okay. He's copied other quirks, basically, is all I'm trying to say. He's copied other people's like basic quirks that he has in his classroom and stuff like that. He's also seen certain people out in public. But the thing is, it's really difficult for Izuku to train on multiple quirks just due to the fact that like the dude, quirk usage out in public and regular day-to-day use in this society isn't exactly a common thing. So now that I think about it, Izuku doesn't have too much experience with many quirks, but the quirks that he can have experience with, oh, you better believe Izuku's going to be using those. That being the case, over the course of the next 2 weeks, Izuku learned how to use Bakugo's explosion quirk dang near better than him. Izuku had always had access to it for almost as long as Bakugo, and now Izuku was taking his training to the next level. When Izuku returned to school, he came in with the thought of, if Bakugo messes with me, I'm gonna blow the dude into a million pieces. Like, he's just like, I'm gonna stand up to him. I'm done being weak defenseless Izuku. And when he would walk into the classroom, he would notice like the whole vibe of people looking at him and thinking about him just completely did a 180. Instead of people looking at him and be like, oh, he's a loser, and just ignoring his existence, all of a sudden people cared. People were looking at him, they're saying hi, they're acting like all of a sudden he exists after all this time. Instead of having an effect of like, oh, they're being nice to me. Dude, Izuku gets pissed because this dude's like, if I was to have stayed weak and I really was quirkless, none of you would care about me. None of you would care if Bakugo beat me into a pulp. But now that you know I'm strong, in fact, probably stronger than most of you, all of a sudden I matter. All of a sudden I'm worth saying hi to. This gravely pisses Deku off, and this would essentially lead to Bakugo getting in the classroom and seeing Deku. Bakugo at this point would blow Izuku's desk up as he would say, huh, looks like you're finally back from that suspension. How'd that time off to you, Deku? As Izuku at this point would get up, turn towards Bakugo and tell him, Bakugo, I'm gonna tell you this once, and that's all the mercy you're gonna get. Leave me alone. And Bakugo, hearing this, would say, you think I'm gonna leave you alone just because you have some weak fire quirk? As Izuku said, yeah, I did. As from here, Bakugo would say, there's not a chance in the frickin' world I'm gonna do that. As he would blow explosions in both of his hands, and then, Izuku would hold one hand out as he would smirk and blow an explosion in his hand with Bakugo turning towards him and be like, what the? Is that my... As Deku would hold one hand behind himself and shoot off towards Bakugo, blaring an explosion square to Bakugo's face, sending him crashing into one of the desks, as suddenly everybody in the classroom would get up and say, wait, there's a fight! Suddenly people would begin crowding around them, going to the door. Bakugo's goons would both stand up and they're like, Bakugo, don't worry, we'll help, with Bakugo saying, stay out of it, losers, or extras. As Bakugo saying, so you have some sort of copy quirk, do you? I guess that's how you were able to use that fire quirk. As at this moment, Bakugo would lunge towards Deku, throwing an explosion, trying to defeat Deku quickly, as Deku would dodge out of the way as fast as possible with his explosion quirk, using his telekinesis quirk to throw one of the desks in Bakugo's way, as Bakugo would actually get caught off guard by that, being like, what? Another one? And Deku in this moment would shoot a flame attack, having more range with that, as Bakugo would get sent flying to the back of the classroom, would actually get burned. Bakugo at this moment would feel the sting and the aching pain of like, have you guys ever like touched a pan when it's hot? Like, he feels that, you know what I mean? At this point, Bakugo's like, why you freaking loser? As he goes blasting towards Deku's direction, and Izuku at this moment would do the same, both of them clashing in an instant, as Deku's explosion would overpower Bakugo's and send him crashing into desks, knocking Bakugo out. At this point, everybody in the classroom would have seen that, and the teachers would walk into Izuku standing over Bakugo being unconscious, as, bro, they don't care what happened, how strong Deku is. At this point, they all have pretty much sided with Bakugo, and they straight up just expel Deku. Deku would be in the principal's office saying, but he started that fight. You could ask anybody in the classroom. I gave him a chance to back down. He was gonna do the same to me if I hadn't defended myself. And the principal would say, I'm sorry, Izuku, but Katsuki Bakugo has been a phenomenal student all the time that he's been here, and we're not exactly gonna take the student's words for anything. All that we know is that when the teacher walked inside, Bakugo was unconscious and you were standing over him. We're sorry, Miss Midoriya, but your son is expelled. In this moment, Izuku would clench his fist and say, are you freaking kidding me? As his eyes would glow red towards the principals, he would say, you're taking his side because he has a powerful quirk, blasting explosion in his hand as he would say, I did too, and now you lost me. Have fun with that weak extra. I'm gonna become the #1 hero and prove to this cruddy school that you made a mistake, not me. As he would barge off, and Inko, seeing that, would say, Izuku. She goes running off after him as she would say, Izuku, I didn't know you had a quirk. As it'd be in this moment, Izuku turns at her and says, you would have known if you had paid attention to me, if you had believed me, if you had watched me when I was in my room or saw the times that I was staring at you from afar use your quirk. You didn't pay attention to me, Mom, and all of a sudden you care? Get out of my way. He would just walk past her and Inko would just be like, Izuku, I'm sorry. She starts crying and Izuku would feel bad, pausing as he would just like look back at his mom and say, Mom, I'm sorry. I crossed the line. Let's go home. They both would get in the car and it would just be a really quiet car drive home, as we would now have a time skip to the day where Izuku was supposed to have the sludge villain incident. This particular day would literally just be Izuku at school. Mind you, Izuku got transferred not to go to another school and all of a sudden be a show off. Dude, that's not the person Izuku is. Izuku's not going to show off when he has no reason to. He's not going to show his cards if he doesn't have to. So Izuku getting transferred to another school would have pretty much told everybody that he has a telekinesis quirk, because mind you, the quirk doctors had never registered exactly what Izuku's quirk was. So for the following next, I believe it's 2 years, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. Yeah, for the next 2 years, Izuku would pretty much just go to that school, stay out of people's way, have a couple of friends that, he hangs out with, maybe have like one love interest that doesn't work out in the end. And, other than that, Izuku is just, he's just kind of big chilling. He's literally like not even making his presence known half the time. Eventually the day would come where the teacher at this school would also announce, that, he has to give out career aptitude tests, because I think that that's something that most schools would do. So yeah, with this being the case, Izuku would be told to everybody that he is applying for UA, and some people in the class would say, what? But he has a telekinesis quirk. How could he? Some people in the class would say, but he's probably just going into general studies. That has to be the case, right? Everybody would be like, yeah, true, and they'd wish Izuku luck. Nobody hates him, no one cares about Izuku. He literally is just like I said, he's out of everybody's way. This would ultimately lead to Izuku, having the next 10 months to continue to train on his quirk. And mind you, the dude has had 2 more years to train on his quirk relentlessly every day. His mom's actually supporting him. Their relationship has been fixed since the last incident that happened. And, Inko's literally doing all she can to support Izuku in his dream. She knows that he's gonna have the potential to become an incredible hero. And she could not be any more proud. She could not be any more just grateful that Izuku Midoriya is her son. And this would just this would change Izuku a little bit of that darkness that was brewing up in him. It would just start fading away, because even though people at this school don't really know who he is, no one's really messing with him. There's not a Bakugo to continue pushing the narrative that the strong crush the weak. So Izuku's whole ideology on that would sort of slowly start dwindling out, you know what I mean, until finally on the other point of perspective, actually, I was gonna say that we would cover the sludge villain incident for Bakugo, but it wouldn't happen. Either the sludge villain gets captured by All Might, or the sludge villain gets away but doesn't affect Bakugo in any way. That being said, Izuku never meets All Might in this timeline, unfortunately, and for the following next 10 months, Izuku just trains on his own, working on different quirks that he could possibly use. Izuku also, over the course of these next couple of months, would actually have his mom drive him to different areas where he's aware that specific heroes patrol at. I'm not going to say the names of specific heroes just because I'm... Actually, wait, let's do it. Let me look up top 100 heroes. And then let me maybe pull up Marvel heroes. Sorry if you guys can hear the keyboard, but yeah, I'm just trying to. Okay, let's see. So we got, okay, so bruh, this is the freaking hero list with all the hero students. Oh, there it is, pro heroes. Is what kind of quirk does Hawks have? He has wings, so I'd assume that that's like a mutation quirk. That's not something he just produces. We got Best Genist. I'm positive that's an emitter quirk. Yeah, so Izuku and his mom would literally go to places where there's heroes that he could actually copy their abilities. People like Best Genist and Crust and Wash. I don't know what, no, that might be a mutation quirk. Maybe not Wash. Him and Fat Gum. Yeah, Fat Gum would be one. Manual, yes. Deku would definitely see Manual, stuff like that. Endeavor, like I said, he's already seen him. Izuku would pretty much have his mom drive him to different areas where pro heroes patrol so that Izuku could catch a glimpse of their quirks and therefore start using them and working on them and all that stuff. So that's how Izuku would train over the course of the next 2 years and 10 months. And finally, Izuku, after all this time had passed and he was just working on his quirk and his mom's helping him out, had moved past everything that happened in the last school. Izuku completely stopped caring about it. This means that after 30 minutes of me yapping about Izuku's origin story practically, we can finally get into the actual events of the story with the entrance exam, which is going to be a really interesting thing to cover for a variety of reasons, with number one being Izuku insanely powerful, copy quirk that he can use to actually take the abilities of others that are in the exam with him. And number two would be the fact that now we finally get to see Izuku put these cool quirks that Izuku has been learning how to use and all of his training over the years to use. So let's get started. Izuku would make his way into the entrance exam area. He takes the test, he passes, yada yada yada. After that, he would make his way towards the robot portion, and here I don't see anything really specific happening. I mean, Izuku would just kind of be looking around, scoping the competition, seeing if there's any people who particularly stand out. But Izuku would realize that unless they're using their quirks, nothing really stands out about them. So Izuku would just wait for the test to pretty much get started, as it eventually would, and Izuku would quickly go on to use his favorite quirk, Endeavors, as he would shoot off into the sky and make his way towards robots as far from the competition as possible, as Izuku would use his flame quirk to shoot flame straight through the robots, destroying 10 robots at once, as a bunch of them would just begin to explode, and Izuku would then turn his attentions towards more robots that are coming his way. Izuku at this point would point 4 fingers towards them as they would start glowing with orbs of energy forming. Izuku, having taken this quirk from a low-ranking hero that had an energy quirk that pretty much allows him to transfer kinetic energy and shoot it out through his fingers. It's a relatively weak quirk because of the fact that this person had a quirk that didn't exactly scream crazy potential. And because this hero didn't exactly put in the wildest amount of effort into it, it's not exactly, the craziest quirk of all time in his hands. But in Izuku's hands, this dude proceeded to shoot 4 lasers out of his fingers, essentially, which end up easily destroying these robots, as Izuku would then go flying up into the sky using Endeavor's quirk once more, as Izuku would find the next giant pile of villains, or of robots. And Izuku, seeing everything from the height that he's at, he could actually see Kaminari off in the distance using his lightning quirk. This would leave Izuku to have his eyes glow red as he would fly down towards the direction of other robots and slam his hand down as he would let out a huge voltage of electricity shoot all crazy, with Izuku thinking, it's been a while since I've used a lightning quirk. And he would just pretty much shoot out a bunch of volts, as at this moment Izuku would feel that his brain was starting to feel weird, as he would stop and realize okay, there's clearly a limit to how this quirk works, as he'd realized that for Kaminari's quirk, there's a pretty gnarly drawback that comes with it of frying his brain, essentially. This would lead Izuku to deciding he doesn't really want to use that quirk as much, and he would continue destroying robot after robot, accumulating, let's say, 15 more robot points, taking out 15 or 10 1-pointers and like a couple 2-pointers or something like that. I don't know. But the point is, Izuku would destroy robots until eventually the 0-pointer would finally be let out. At this point, Izuku, turning to see this gigantic behemoth of a robot, would have no interest in it, considering the fact that it's worth 0 points, and Izuku just wants to keep getting more and more points, as many as he possibly can, to ensure his spot at UA. Right? It'd be at this moment that Izuku could see everybody running away from it, as he would think, of course they are. I mean, why would anyone fight that thing? As Izuku would think, it's not impossible, but there's no point. As at this point, Izuku would start turning to run as well, but he would overhear some screams coming from the distance, as he would see Uraraka's in danger. Now, in this timeline, Izuku's never met her, she didn't save him from falling or anything, but Izuku's heart would just not let him see somebody about to get crushed and just walk away. This man would instantly proceed to shoot off towards Uraraka, as he would grab her with one arm and fly her out of the way as quickly as he possibly could, as Izuku would say, "Are you okay?" Uraraka at this point turns to Izuku and says, "Yeah, I'm fine. Can you put me down?" As she would look down and be like, "I have a bit of a fear of heights." Izuku at this point would look at her and say, "Oh, don't worry about that." As you know, they would fly further from the 0-pointer robot, and Izuku would let her down, say, "Good luck." As you know, he pretty much runs off trying to destroy more robots, but as he does this, the test would be over, and Izuku would have barely gotten like 5 feet away from her as that happens. Uraraka at this point would turn to Izuku and say, "Well, I guess we didn't have any more time to defeat robots. Thanks for saving me back there. I owe you 1,000,000. As from here, Izuku, turning towards her, would say, "Yeah, no problem." As you know, he pretty much just runs off, and Uraraka would smile. You know, at this point he makes his way home, and he would pretty much just await the results of what happened. Nezu and all the other teachers who were watching Izuku's display would be shocked. Not only did Izuku display an incredibly potent fire quirk, which is eerily reminiscent to Endeavor's quirk, but Izuku also seemed to use the same quirk Kaminari used, but it was a different color for some reason. Mind you, Izuku's flames aren't red, they're green. Izuku's lightning isn't yellow, it's green. Yeah, it's kind of gonna follow that pattern. He's gonna have like the green, or maybe we should do red because of the Adam. Yeah, let's just do red since it's Adam's eyes. You know what I mean? So let's do that. Oh, also, let's say Izuku's hair is blonde in this specific video, just to match the aesthetic of the thumbnail one that we have going on. His hair is blonde, and his eyes are usually green, which is a pretty sick combo already. But whenever he uses his quirk, they're red. That being said, though, he would easily get into UA. I mean, Nezu and everybody else would be so unbelievably impressed with Izuku, and All Might himself would too. Like, heck, this dude is already considering maybe talking to him about being his successor, and he hasn't even met the kid. That being said, though, the whole roster would finally be completed, and this would be when we would get this very specific reunion between a certain Izuku and Katsuki Bakugo, which I just can't wait to talk about. So let's immediately get into it. All right, I can see Izuku pretty much waking up on his first day of classes. Izuku's super excited. It's completely escaped him that Bakugo was also going to be applying to the national school, so Izuku's not even expecting to see Bakugo. Mind you, he didn't see him in the examination area because they were sitting on opposite sides of the room, and Izuku wasn't exactly looking for Bakugo. They also didn't bump into each other before entering the actual entrance exam, and because they weren't in the same like entrance exam area, they don't even know that each other exist. Do you know what I'm saying? So with that being the case, what pretty much ends up going down is that Izuku gets dropped off at school. The dude's day is literally all sunshine and rainbow. Like, the dude might as well be SpongeBob right now, because the dude is like on his way to school going, "I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready." And then this dude just walks into classroom and opens the door, taking a deep breath, just thinking, all right, this is the beginning to a new journey. Izuku would open the door only to be greeted to the sight of Ida and Bakugo arguing, as Izuku, seeing Bakugo, would just have the life drained from his face, as that memory would hit back, like that memory would hit him like a train. And Izuku and Bakugo both would make eye contact, as instantly in the room there would just be a thick tension as Izuku and Bakugo both stare at each other. And Bakugo says, "Would you look at that? Looks like Deku actually made it into the national school. Hope you don't fall behind too much. You hear that, extra?" As he would pretty much just take his seat, and Izuku would just be like, whatever, Bakugo. At this point, Aizawa would wake up, going on to tell everybody to put these on and meet him outside, and Deku would just kind of ignore Bakugo, being like, I'm not going to reawaken the past. I'm not about to get into a fight with Bakugo on my first day of school, just thinking, ignore him, ignore him, ignore him. But as they're walking out, Bakugo would shoulder check Deku, and Deku would just kind of sit there like, ooh, I'm not the one, Bakugo, I am not the one, like, don't mess with me. But he would just kind of stay quiet. He's like, okay, let me just leave him alone. And they would make their way outside. At this point, would pretty much get the quirk apprehension test, and Bakugo would be stunned to know that the person who got the best scores on the entrance exam would have actually been Izuku Midoriya. So Izuku would be handed the ball as Aizawa would explain to him, or not explain to him, but ask him, hey, what'd you get back in middle school as your ball throw score? As Izuku would say, I got this many meters. Aizawa would say, good, well now use your quirk to throw it. As Izuku at this point would think to himself, what quirk should I even use right now? At the moment, I have a lightning quirk, I have a energy beam quirk, and I have a flame quirk. I should have scouted out if there's a better quirk that I could use for this test. If only I'd have known it was coming, I would have prepared myself better. But ultimately, Izuku would sigh, and using his flame quirk would throw the ball as far as he possibly can, getting scores that are like, let's say, 500 meters, right? Let's say 500 meters. Aizawa would show everybody the score that Izuku got, as everybody would be like, whoa, this is gonna be so much fun. As Aizawa, looking at the class, would say, fun? You think being in a hero school is gonna be fun? Well, how about we raise the stakes? Whoever comes in last place will be expelled. This would shock everybody, as they're all like, wait, what? Expelled? But we all made it here fair and square. You can't just do that. Ultimately, Aizawa would say, I can do whatever I want. Here at UA, us teachers are given full authority to run our classes however we would like. And whoever we deem to be unworthy of taking this course, we have the authority to expel. Is that clear? So I want everybody to give it their best out there. As at this point, everybody else would go forth and take the ball throw test. As Izuku, seeing Uraraka's score, would be incredibly impressed, thinking, if she would have gone first, I could have just used her quirk. That would have been awesome. He would then see Sato go next, as he would quickly go on to consume some food and then throw the ball pretty freaking far. Like, the dude gets a really impressive score because of the nature of his quirk, Sugar Rush. So Izuku, noting that Sato's quirk is almost perfect for most of the things that they're probably going to end up doing, with Izuku just kind of looking around, seeing a track, seeing a long jump thing, understanding that his quirk would probably work very well, would go on to actually copy that quirk, replacing Kaminari's quirk slot and taking that quirk. As he would walk over to Sato and literally just look at him and be like, hey, my sugar levels are getting a little low. Do you think I could have some? As, you know, Sato just turns to Deku and like hands him like 4 or 5 sugar cubes. After this, you know, the rest of the tests would come up, and just to remember what exactly the tests are, mind you, like, I'm over here literally like researching this stuff as I'm making this video, just trying to do my best here. So there was the 50-meter dash, there was the grip strength, the standing long jump, the repeated side steps, the ball throw, and then push-ups, sit-ups, and something else, I'm guessing. All right, obviously the throw is already done, so that means that Izuku's usage of Sugar Rush would literally be perfect. During the 50-meter dash, Sugar Rush, because of the fact that Izuku is an amped up version of it, Izuku's muscles would bulge out of nowhere. The dude has like this red aura around him as he just runs as fast as possible, getting scores even higher than Iida's. During the grip strength, Deku's newfound strength using Sugar Rush would crush the actual, or not crush it, but would like leave his hand imprinted on it, you know what I mean? After this, we would get the standing long jump, which Izuku would actually use his flame quirk to just fly over and clear. He also could have just used Sato's ability, but what's the fun in that? Repeated side steps, again, Sato Sugar Rush. Ball throw, well, he already did that, so he can't exactly change his test anymore. And for the push-ups, sit-ups, and all that stuff, once again, Sugar Rush. This dude took Sato and pretty much just like took his quirk without even asking. This would lead everybody to be like, whoa, like he has a fire quirk and he has an enhancement quirk, as Sato watching this would be like, that looks like my quirk. You know what I mean? As Izuku would actually be approached by Sato, who would ask him if he was using his quirk, and Izuku would go on to explain that he has a quirk that allows him to copy other people's quirks, with Sato asking if he did this by making contact with him, and Izuku saying, "Oh no, I just looked at you." Sato would be like, "What? You can copy quirks only by seeing them?" As he'd say, "That's incredible. How many quirks can you copy at a time?" As Izuku would say, "Let's not get into that right now." And Bakugo, who would be watching all this along with the rest of the class, would simply scoff, as Aizawa would note that Izuku is an incredibly smart student. Understanding the nature of this test, would have used the best quirk that he could have used to his advantage. But one thing would be a little interesting for everybody, or just for Sato specifically. He'd be wondering why exactly Izuku's version of his quirk was so much stronger than his. I mean, there has to be an explanation, right? That being the case, after the day would finally be over, Izuku would grab his things and begin walking home, and as this would happen, Bakugo would actually stop him, saying, "So Izuku, it looks like you actually got a lot stronger," or Deku, I mean. As, you know, Deku looking at Bakugo would say, "I don't feel like rehashing the past right now, Bakugo, just get out of my way." Bakugo at this point would turn to him and say, "You know, we're eventually gonna have to have a little bit of a rematch. I just wanted to let you know that the next time we fight, you won't be getting so lucky. My quirk, someone else's quirk, it won't matter. I'm gonna crush you, Deku, like the bug that you are. You hear me?" As Izuku, hearing those words, would just walk past thinking, "Yeah, sure, Bakugo." As eventually, after this would happen, we would get a brief time skip to the very next, time that we have a prominent, test event or something like that. And this specific thing would obviously be the battle trial arc. All Might would bust into the classroom, he makes his grand appearance, and Izuku seeing All Might would be like, "This is perfect. I've always wanted All Might's quirk, and now he's gonna be a teacher of mine? This could not have worked out any better for me." At this moment, Izuku could feel his muscles start to kind of bulge up a little bit, as Izuku would grip his hand and he would feel sparks of light electricity start crackling off of him. As All Might, turning towards the back of the classroom, would notice this and would see Izuku, and it would almost, All Might could almost feel like Izuku was using One for All. Without saying anything, without seeing anything, it was almost like a unspoken thing. And as this would happen, All Might would be wondering if that is the case, because if it is, he might not even have to give him One for All after all. Not to mention the fact that this is a big deal, because now Izuku's gonna have the quirk. So with that being the case, and All Might, he would know it, but only have a feeling, he hasn't confirmed it. It's just a really strong gut feeling. He'd be staring at Deku, and Deku and him would make eye contact as All Might would pause, and the whole class is just looking at him and Deku. But before finally All Might would be like, anyways, class, so today we are going to be having 2v2 battles where there's going to be heroes and villains, and everybody would sort of just be watching as everything's taking place. We would pretty much end up having the battle trial arc, and Izuku's opponent would be exactly the same as in the original. It's Deku, Uraraka versus Bakugo and Ida, since there's really no reason for me to change this. This means that we would now finally get the awaited rematch. Or should I actually have it happen at the sports festival so that Deku could just absolutely destroy him there? Nah, let's just have it happen here. Anyways, so the way that I could see this battle playing out is that Izuku and Uraraka would still be the heroes, and Izuku, knowing that Bakugo was gonna be, coming after him first, would literally be itching for a fight. Not only does he want to crush Bakugo, but he can't wait to try out One for All. And what Izuku would do the second that the test would start, Izuku and Uraraka hadn't even entered the building. Izuku would literally just jump up into the air and see how unbelievably high he jumped. Mind you, this is nothing but his pure physical stats. Of course, he replaced Sato's quirk for this, right? As Izuku's like, dude, in comparison to Sato's quirk, I don't need that thing. But one thing Izuku would notice, or not notice yet, because he's not just going full throttle with his jumps, right? Because if he does, I really do think Izuku's eyes are just gonna strain like never before, and he's gonna he's not gonna have full access to One for All, is all that I'm getting to. Maybe he's gonna have access to, say, 40% of it, but that's being highly generous. So let's go 40 is fair enough. 40 is fair enough. Obviously, he's not going to have access to the other quirks that come with One for All, but just the board, there's just the baseline strength. That being the case, Izuku would enter the building, and Bakugo, much like you would expect, would come crashing down, explosions full blaring as his gauntlets are getting fuller and fuller by the second. And this is exactly Bakugo's plans. Like, he plans to absolutely decimate Izuku by all means necessary. And Izuku would just sort of be waiting for him, as he would have told Araraka to stay outside of the building and not to come in until he gives her the okay. As you know, both of them would nod at each other, and Izuku would wait for Bakugo to come and turn the corner. Izuku, remembering how Bakugo used to fight back in the day, would go to quickly expect the big right hit to be the first thing that Bakugo would do, and that's exactly what would happen. Deku would counter, as he would then go on to punch Bakugo square in the stomach, sending him crashing into the roof. As he would send him up a floor, he literally sent him into the next floor. Izuku at this point would literally jump up into the next floor as well, as Bakugo would be on the ground coughing, be like, how the heck did you? As Deku would walk, getting closer and closer to Bakugo, as Bakugo would hold one gauntlet up, pull the pin, and blow the explosion. At this point, Deku would literally have just been standing there, and he had to take the full brunt force of that explosion. Like, there's no him tanking it and just walking. No, dude, it hurt, okay? There's no other way I could put it. It freaking hurt. Deku would have taken the full brunt force of that, and like, let's just say he's gonna be feeling that for a couple of days. But regardless, because the original Deku ended up surviving that explosion, I'm gonna say that this version of Izuku does as well. You know, it hurts, but you know, it doesn't kill him. Anyways, he rushes towards the direction of Bakugo, you know, blitzing in. Bakugo not even expecting that kind of speed, as Izuku would throw a fire charged one for all punch straight to Bakugo's stomach once more, as he would send Bakugo crashing into one of the walls, and he would be knocked out unconscious. At this point, Izuku would look at his fist, which was covered in fire and one for all sparks, and he would think, awesome. At this point, All Might watching this would be like, this kid is incredible. As you know, Izuku would make his way to the bomb room and just pretty much touch the bomb, having forgotten to even warn Araraka about the fact that they could go now. As they pass and everybody just starts hyping Deku up, they're just like, dude, like, you're so strong, yada yada yada. Like, this would just fill Izuku with a big bright smile, as Izuku would be having a good time, literally just seeing Bakugo get carried off by a stretcher taking a recovery girl. As you know, Izuku knows he beat Bakugo up, but he knows he'll be okay. Like, he did not kill him, okay? Like, maybe he made him throw up with a little bit of blood mixed in there, but he will be fine. They have quirks to heal that. That being said, though, Izuku, seeing this have happened, would have pretty much ended up being told to stay after class by All Might, as Izuku would be wondering what the heck all this is about, right? With Izuku not knowing about One For All or any of these things at all, as All Might would end up entering the classroom and would say, "Young man, I would like to speak to you about the quirk that you displayed today. I am well aware that your quirk allows you to copy other quirks, but what shocked me is that it seemed like you had copied mine for a second." Izuku at this point would smirk and turn to All Might as he would say, "I did. What, are you gonna scold me, All Might?" He'd be worried. He'd be like, do you not want me to use it? Like, I won't if you don't want me to, but like, it's a great quirk to add to my arsenal. As All Might would say, "No, nothing like that, young man. I'm actually here to talk to you about that quirk." As All Might from this point on would get serious and would tell Izuku the history of the quirk, how it works, how One For All or All For One is a threat, how he's glad that Izuku's able to, you know, use this quirk, saying that for years, like, he's been looking for somebody to pass his quirk onto, but because Izuku has his quirk already, it's gonna make it so much easier for All Might, knowing that not only is he gonna be able to pass his quirk onto someone else, but Izuku's gonna be another person who can also use the ability of One For All, you know, without having to take that quirk. As All Might would be incredibly impressed, saying that he knows of a quirk that can steal quirks, but not one that could literally copy a quirk. As All Might would go on to explain that never in his life has he encountered anyone with a copy quirk that could have copied his quirk, because it was a stockpiling quirk. As Izuku would say, "Oh, I guess that the reason that I could copy your quirk is because my quirk's effectiveness works best with emitter types." And okay, so yeah, emitter type quirks is the ones that he can do. And what was the other quirk that I said he could also use? Accumulation and multi-category quirks. As at this point, All Might would say, "So then I'm assuming this means that you're unable to use transformation quirks and mutation quirks, am I correct?" As Izuku would say, "Exactly. From here, All Might would, laugh, being like, ha, 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 well, you're impressive, kid. You know what I mean? I could just see that scene playing out as All Might just turns to Deku and says, I'm expecting great things from you, young man. Well, you can go home. Sorry for wasting too much of your time. As Izuku would bow to All Might and say, none wasted at all Might. And as he's making his way home, he would actually see Bakugo walking out of the nurse's office as Izuku would look at Bakugo and Bakugo would look at Deku, just kind of looking down for a second, as Izuku would feel bad, where was the fiery Bakugo he remembered? But another part of him would feel good. He enjoyed the fact that he put Bakugo in his place and that dumb cocky attitude of his is finally gone. At least now he's not going to be some stuck-up prick. Anyways, he'd make his way home and we would then get a little bit of a brief time skip to the next day where something new is actually going to be discovered. Izuku doesn't only have All Might's quirk in his rotation now, meaning that he has Endeavor's quirk all for one for all and the ability to pretty much shoot out the what's the word I'm looking for? The energy beams. Energy beams and the telekinesis. So what Izuku would pretty much end up doing is swapping the energy beam ability with Todoroki's half hot, half cold. And the reason that he would do this is because he wanted to test a theory. If Izuku has this ability, which is something he hasn't actually had a hold of all his life before, the ice ability, Izuku could swap out Endeavor's ability for both. He could have fire and ice, and that would be so beneficial for Izuku. The only downside to that is that with Endeavor's quirk, he's able to use fire on both sides to essentially fly. But I'm not sure if Todoroki's able to do that with only half of his side being flames. I don't know. Maybe he could, but because I'm not entirely positive, I'm going to be saying that Izuku's not entirely positive either. And so he just tries to work on Todoroki's quirk. Izuku would notice one thing. Todoroki's flame output is actually the same as Endeavor's. And, this wouldn't surprise him considering the fact that that is Endeavor's son. So with that being the case, Izuku after school would actually spend his time working on the ice quirk, understanding its drawbacks and seeing what the limit of it is, seeing as he hasn't had a quirk that works quite like this before. But because he's worked up his body to such a degree, he can handle more than you would expect a normal person to. So he's not able to use an enhanced version of it because he's never used a quirk quite like an ice one before, but he's able to use his ice quirk on par with Todoroki, the same level. And that is insane. Izuku has one for all, half hot, half cold, and Endeavor's flame quirk. And the second that Izuku gets the hang of using, Todoroki's flame quirk in tandem with one for all to be able to leap up into the air and move around quickly, Izuku's gonna be a deadly combo. Now the dude only needs some sort of healer support quirk, and after that he'll most likely be set. But with that being the case, we essentially now jump towards the USJ arc, where all of the students would be inside of the bus talking about who the strongest in the class is, as people would say, oh, it has to be Izuku, right? He can just copy your quirk, so if you have a strong quirk, he can just take yours and beat you with it, Tsuyu would say. As Todoroki hearing that would acknowledge is thinking, has he taken mine yet? As he would stare at Izuku, and Izuku would look at him and kind of just give him a bit of a smirk, which would confirm Todoroki's thoughts. He's like, looks like he has. As the students would make their way into the actual school. Bro, black hole. Okay, give me a second, guys. I need to look up if is black hole a quirk. I'm just gonna look up his black hole quirk. Okay, let me look up what kind of category her quirk goes into. Emitter, bro. Deku's gonna have access to black freaking hole. This dude can use a black hole quirk. You guys know how busted that is. Oh, dude. Okay. I don't know why I'm over here. I'm okay. Sorry, I'm losing it, guys. Anyways, what would end up taking place is that Izuku would watch Pro Hero 13 give her speech, as Izuku would ask her if she could demonstrate her quirk, and the second she would do so, this man Deku's eyes would glow red as he would smirk, having traded Endeavor's quirk for this, thinking that there's no way he was going to pass this opportunity up. At this point, Izuku would think to himself if there's any way that he can maybe work on having more slots, because 3 is kind of limiting, but because he's unaware of that, actually, I like the fact that it is limited. It's not the most busted thing in the world. Let's keep it at 3. Izuku would consider this, but ultimately he'd think to himself that he's not sure and he's not exactly going to risk any of these quirks to try that out. So for now, Izuku wouldn't think about any of that, and he would just continue, going on his merry way. That being the case, eventually Kurogiri would actually end. Dude, speaking of Kurogiri, having a teleportation quirk would be extremely useful. Let me look it up. Kurogiri. All right, Kurogiri. There it is. Kurogiri. What kind of quirk do you have? Come on, quirk. There it is. Quirk. He has a... Why is it not telling me? I'm so confused. Okay, let me just look it up on Google itself. Sorry that I keep having like these sections where I'm literally on my PC just typing stuff up, but like I have to know because I'm not 100% sure how these people's quirks work. All right, let me try again. Quirk, warp gate. Obviously the quirk is called warp gate. What kind of type of quirk is it? It is an emitter quirk. It's an emitter quirk. Izuku can have portals. Izuku's gonna have to make a tough decision because now he's at a point where he can have half hot, half cold, an ice quirk and a fire quirk, or he could have a cool teleportation quirk. Like now Deku's getting to a point where he's like, he has to start making these choices. So like you would expect, Kurogiri would end up appearing, and as this happens, what I actually can see happening is Izuku noticing that this thing is creating some sort of portals. Izuku would actually copy the ability instantly and create a portal to actually teleport everyone away except for himself. Like literally everyone is gone. They're instantly teleported outside of the USJ, and Aizawa's thinking to himself, it was the kid. As Kurogiri, seeing that happen before his eyes, would be stunned as Izuku would say, surprised? You didn't think anybody else could use your quirk? Warp gate? As Izuku knows the name of the quirk and how it functions when he copies the ability. Kurogiri at this point would say, how did you? As Izuku would hold one hand out not hold one hand out, but create a portal which would allow him to put his fist through it and punch at Kurogiri's metal thing that's inside of him. This would lead Kurogiri to being taken out completely because the dude just got a 40% smash straight to the face, as Izuku would go on to open portals and just jump into them, appearing right next to different villains as he would just slaughter them, bro. This man proceeds to absolutely demolish them. At this point, Izuku, he made the choice to take that over Black Hole. So he's not using Black Hole at the moment, but he is fighting with the Warp Gate and freezing villains and punching villains and shooting fire at villains. The dude's going crazy. Mind you, for the water section, Izuku would have teleported over it and pretty much used and essentially just shot fire into the water, heating the water to bring it to a boil temperature, as all the villains got taken out inside of that. And Izuku then pretty much went on to teleport in front of Shigaraki, who would say, impressive, but you didn't account for the Nomu, did you? As the Nomu would then appear, or the Nomu would just be standing behind him, and Izuku would say, what, was that your big bad plan? This bird for brain? It's pathetic. I can't even as the Nomu would come flying in and punch Izuku in his stomach, actually sending Deku, it would punch him in the face, sending him flying back, as Izuku would get up, shake himself off, looking at the Nomu and just being like, what the heck? As Izuku would get mad at this, the dude falls down into the ground as a portal would have ended up sucking him in, and Izuku would come flying in at the Nomu, as using his speed he would punch the Nomu square in the jaw, as the Nomu would blow back a little bit, but the blow would quickly heal as the Nomu's jaw would be sent right back into place. And Izuku would think, it has regeneration, doesn't it? As Shigaraki would say, the Nomu's a perfect being. It's an amalgamation of all the powerful quirks. As Izuku would smile and say, interesting. Izuku from this point would literally teleport outside. Aizawa would look at him and say, kid, are you? As Izuku would teleport out once more, having taken Black Hole's quirk, or 13's quirk, and hold one finger out in front of him, one finger out in front of him, as the Nomu would get sucked into the black hole, ripping it to shreds. Every part of it would be destroyed, as he would have ended up sacrificing half hot, half cold for that, and he would then turn towards the direction of Shigaraki as he would say, guess you're next. From this point, Kurogiri would actually wake up and teleport Kurogiri away before Izuku could, you know, pretty much bluff that he was gonna kill him, because he wasn't gonna do that. Izuku's not a murderer, at least not yet. No, I'm joking. He's never gonna be one. But the point is, Izuku just did something in like 3 minutes that no other hero could have possibly done. After this would happen, Izuku would go on to teleport outside and tell Aizawa he's sorry for how he acted, but this was the best way to ensure that none of his classmates got hurt, saying that he took every single person out, with the exception of the guy with the hands on his face and the teleporter, saying they got away. Aizawa at this point would go to Deku and say, "Do you have any idea how reckless that was, kid?" As 13 would say, "The kid did defeat everybody. Cut him some slack, Aizawa." And Aizawa looking at the direction of Izuku. Oh, dude, I wonder what kind of quirk Aizawa has. Let me look that up. What kind of quirk does Aizawa have? Because a quirk canceling ability would be sick. All right. He has it just says erasure. It doesn't necessarily say what kind of quirk. Come on, say something already. What kind of quirk is it? Is it an emitter? Is it a erasure? It is yeah, it's an emitter. Izuku could even gain that ability. That'd be sick, dude. Bro, this version of Deku is, if he had more slots, the dude would just be unbelievably unstoppable. Like at the moment, One For All isn't even looking like the most busted thing Izuku could pull out at any given time. And with Kurogiri's teleport ability, Izuku has the capability to teleport to where he needs to go to copy certain quirks and then go back. So now the prospect of Izuku needing more spots isn't going to be something he actually needs to worry about. Having Kurogiri's quirk literally just fix every problem Izuku had previously had. He can just alternate quirks using that one specific teleportation ability. And Izuku would be so thankful to these villains. After this would happen, All Might would have a discussion with Aizawa about what Deku did, with Aizawa saying that even though he saved everybody, he put himself in danger, and you know, like saying, you know, like the kid should be reprimanded. But Nezu and All Might would pretty much end up saying, no, there's no way. And Aizawa would be like, all right, I understand. Like, you know, he would have just been like, the dude could have gotten himself killed, and he was like being a stickler for the rules pretty much. But eventually after that would end up taking place, we would get a 1 week break where the school would end up actually you know, having to clear up the air about what ended up going down. And during that 1 week break, Izuku and All Might actually would have gotten together, and Izuku would have ended up telling All Might about the fact that now he has a quirk that allows him to essentially teleport to where he needs in case he's ever in a pinch and needs to use One For All. And he would ask All Might if there's any way that if he was to ever teleport in front of him, he could just display his quirk to him, leaving Izuku to use his ability whenever he needs it. All Might would nod and tell Izuku he can use One For All whenever he wants. He can even consider himself an honorary user of it, as Izuku would like thank All Might. And from here he would go on to ask, you know, 13 the same thing, saying that her quirk is incredibly potent and that he promises he would never use it to kill an actual person, saying it could be great for bluffs and to, you know, like do certain things. 13 would end up saying, you know, she'll allow him, but to not go overboard, and if he ever kills someone with it, she'll never let him use it again. As Izuku would acknowledge this and be like, all right, I understand. As you know, Deku at this point was just like, he's in a frenzy of like being able to use all of these really freaking cool quirks. And bro, the dude is him. All right, there's no other way for me to put it. The dude is literally him. That being said, we now finally get to cover the event of the UA Sports Festival, and because Izuku would have ended up getting the best score on the entrance exam, he'd be the one responsible for giving the speech, which means that bro would give an absolutely bonkers speech, hyping everybody up, telling them all to do their best, as we would then get the first event of the UA Sports Festival, the obstacle race. The second that this race would begin, I don't mean to brag, but bro, Izuku would just straight up teleport to the finish line, as they'd say, is he allowed to do that? And President Mike would be like, yeah, bet your butt he is. He's using his newfound quirk. He's using his newly discovered quirk to everybody copy. It allows him to essentially he'd explain the quirk, going on to give like a brief rundown of Izuku Midoriya, as he'd say he's quickly becoming one of the most promising students in class 1A, as you know, he's like hyping Deku up and everybody's like, yeah, Izuku. And Izuku would just kind of like smile and wave at the crowd. walking past, having gotten 1 million points the headband, as we would then get the cavalry battle. What Deku would do in terms of the cavalry battle would be copy Aizawa's erasure quirk, as Deku would pretty much make his way into the arena with his teammates being Uraraka, Mei Hatsume, and Tokiyami. With all of them together, Izuku, anytime that anyone would try to get near him, the first attempt would probably be Bakugo. Izuku would cancel his quirk, leaving Bakugo to nearly fall onto the ground, no more explosions, as, you know, we would have Sato catching him with his tape and stopping him from hitting the ground. Todoroki, realizing that Izuku using this erasure quirk is going to be affecting him a lot if he tries to go after him. So most people who would have normally tried going after his headband would steer clear of him because he's using the erasure quirk. You could say, oh, by the time, you know, with the time he's blinking, we can go take the headband, but it's just not worth the risk, as everybody else would see it. And so Deku would move on to the 1v1 battles, where Izuku would be faced off against Shinso for the first match. Izuku, as soon as the first match would start, would ask, so what's your quirk? As Shinso would lie to Izuku and say, that's mine, what's yours? As Izuku would smirk and simply open a warp gate underneath Shinso, which would leave him outside of the arena, or no, not the arena, but like on the grass, as Shinso would say, what the? And Deku would say, you can't lie to me. I know what your quirk is. Brainwash, right? As Shinso would say, how did he? And Deku would use that exact same quirk on Shinso, saying, because I can copy quirks, remember? As from here, he would just simply walk off of the arena and people would be like, whoa, he just used the kid's quirk on him. That's awesome. You know, like everybody just starts cheering and they're all getting super hyped, as we would then get the second battle, Todoroki versus Deku. But unfortunately for Todoroki, the second that he would go on to shoot one of the gigantic ice beams, Deku would use his fingers to, or no, not even his fingers, but he would copy Todoroki's quirk using his fire side, as he would shoot it straight towards the direction of the ice and he would melt it faster than Todoroki could create it. Todoroki would grit his teeth, saying, that damn flame quirk. As, you know, he'd be getting pissed. Like, he's like, dude, like, how dare he use a fire quirk to try to beat me? And he's just getting saltier and saltier. But at the end of the day, after, you know, like, they're going back and forward and like Todoroki's just shooting ice and Deku's just shooting fire, Deku would say, I'm getting bored, as a portal would open underneath Todoroki, as he would fall through it, having been caught off guard by this, as he would just land on the grass and would just kind of be like, damn it, as, you know, Deku would be considered the winner, and Todoroki would stare at Deku, you know, like giving him daggers for eyes, as Izuku would say, what? Consider yourself lucky. I didn't beat you up that bad, did I? As, you know, Todoroki would realize that he does have a point, and he would go on to understand, like, okay, like, he probably would have won anyways. As Todoroki would still be mad, like, knowing that that is the case, but like would still be salty about it, you know what I mean? Like, no one likes losing, right? So with that being the case, Deku would pretty much move on to the finals swiftly, and the person that Deku would end up meeting in the finals would be none other than Bakugo. As Deku would pretty much end up knowing that the last couple of fights that he had would have been a little bit of like washes, like they were a bit lame, would go on to say, all right, let me give the people what they want. As, you know, before the Proctor Midnight could even say begin, Deku would turn towards Bakugo and say, how about this, Bakugo? I promise not to use any other quirk but explosions. We'll go head to head with your quirk. Let the best man win. As Bakugo would say, you sure about that, Deku? Because you already know how the results are gonna go. I'm gonna crush you. And from here, Izuku would say, I'm positive, getting into a really cool fighting style, as Bakugo would smirk and he would shoot towards the direction of Deku using a misdirection explosion, and Izuku would mirror him, flipping over him in the air, and they would go explosion for explosion. These dudes are literally going band for band, but with explosions, right? They're going at it. Explosions are being thrown left and right. They're using misdirection attacks on each other. Bakugo's pulling out all the stops, everything he can think of. AP shots would be shot, something that he would have developed even earlier in the original story. As Deku, holding out four fingers on each hand, would aim them at the direction of Bakugo and would shoot explosions out of each individual hand that would shoot out like lasers. Bakugo at this point would say, "What the heck? I can't even," as he would, get hit by a couple of those, and he would grit his teeth thinking he could use my quirk better than me. At this point, Bakugo would get angrier and angrier, and he would start blinding him as Deku would start getting the upper hand and would absolutely defeat Bakugo in a landslide victory where he literally pulls the "anything you can do, I can do better than you," as he would defeat Bakugo, and then he would look at the crowd holding his hand up as everybody starts cheering, and All For One would be watching this thinking, "This is an interesting turn of events. I have to get rid of him." As Deku at this point would be cheering, and everybody's like, "He's the future #1," and they're absolutely right. But after this would happen, Deku would get the ceremony of having the what's the word I'm looking for? The medal thing, as Deku would, be awarded his medal for everything that he did during the UA Sports Festival arc. And after this, we can now immediately jump into the following arc, which would be the Hero Killer arc. Now, here's what's interesting. My thing is, would Deku actually go with Gran Torino? And the reason I asked this is because of the fact that obviously he has access to One for All. But the thing is, does he still have the same thing, drive to be "Oh, All Might told me to go with him"? Because I could realistically see him getting an internship offer from literally every pro hero. Not some pro heroes, not many pro heroes, every pro hero. This would lead Izuku to going to a different agency that he would have gone to in the original. Maybe, I don't really know what agency we're going to be going with in this timeline, but whatever agency it is, it's going to be pretty freaking cool. So with that being the case, Deku would go to a different agency, which means that he doesn't go to Hosu. And one thing that I do have to point out would be that with Deku not going to Hosu and Todoroki not being told, "Hey, come help me," this means that the hero killer would either paralyze Ida and keep him out of commission for good to become a hero, or the more likely option, straight up kill him. Unfortunately for Ida, he would be paralyzed by Stain, who would show him a bit of mercy, after for not being a full-fledged hero, but he would paralyze him nonetheless. And now Ida can never run again. He'll be lucky if he could even walk. That being the case, this would be major news, and it would be a big hit for UA that, a student got gravely injured while that happened. The last time something like this happened was with Shirakumo, something that many of y'all are not even aware of. But point being, after this would happen, it'd be there'd be 2 weeks where UA has to deal with the media and everything that's going down, and Ida would give a personal statement saying that it was his fault, and that he shouldn't have gone after revenge, saying that UA had no idea of this and that it was entirely his fault, and that his family will never stop supporting UA, saying that school has done wonders for them, and he's grateful for the opportunity to have even been accepted into such a wonderful school. He hypes them up. Everybody's just like, well, if this kid doesn't hate them, then we don't either. So the media's, they calm down after a while. You know what I mean? Every storm eventually calms down a bit. So with that being the case, eventually all of the students returned back to the class, where they would have the rescue training race, if you guys even remember that. But right after that, they would all be informed of the final exams arc. And it'd be around this point where we can essentially expect to get a fight between Deku and All Might, where All Might would want to see how powerful exactly Izuku is, with Principal Nezu sort of understanding that Deku doesn't exactly have an inherent weakness that he can just fully go after. But because Deku and Bakugo don't like each other, he would still pair the two up against All Might, and so the battle would begin. I could see Deku trying to talk to Bakugo and be like, "All right, let's fight him like this," and Bakugo just being like, "No, stay out of my way, Deku," as he would pretty much just rush at All Might and get the brakes beat off of him. Bakugo tried to do it all on his own, and that was his fatal mistake. He'd get knocked out by All Might, and right after that would happen, Deku and All Might would have a full-on out battle, as All Might, with those weights on, would do his best facing off against a version of Deku who's using One for All and a Warp Gate quirk, and at any moment, mind you, could literally cancel this man's quirk. Or No, he stopped using that when he was doing the Aizawa thing. So, but at any moment it could pretty much just brainwash him, which was another quirk that he had in his stockpile, in his 3 stockpile quirk area. This means that as the battle's going on and All Might and him are having fun, they're having a blast. Deku's having the battle of his life right now against his idol. He's enjoying it. He would eventually ask All Might what he thinks, as All Might would say, "I'm very proud," and he'd be under the mind control. At this point, All Might, like Izuku would say, "I won," as he would try to tie All Might up, but All Might would break out of it using the vestiges of One for All, as All Might would smile and say, "You thought the battle would end this quick, young man?" As Izuku would pretty much just teleport out of the actual arena and say, "I did." And All Might at this point would kind of just smirk, be like, "Well, what did I expect from the kid? He's a 1 in a billion talent." As at this point, Izuku would have won. He would just show off how incredibly potent he is. Like, the dude is already strong enough to defeat everyone in the series. Like, we're talking full powered Shigaraki that like comes out in the anime and in the manga. Like, we're talking every single person in the series, Deku would absolutely wash. There's absolutely zero doubts in my mind that Deku could beat anyone. So with that being the case, what we're now going to be covering is the Forest Training Camp arc. And during this arc, I don't really see anything interesting happening in the sense of like me to cover something that would be different than the original. Maybe what could happen is that we get some sort of like love interest moment for Deku, potentially, question mark. I don't know. I'm not really a fan of doing like love interest stuff anymore in my videos. I'll do that sometimes, but not often. It's only when it actually matters to the story and like something like that. But anyways, with that being the case, the students would go through the Pixie Bob fight like they do in the original, and eventually they go through about 4 days of training before Lycan Cannon, the Vanguard Action Squad, would arrive. Now, the Vanguard Action Squad would have one goal, and that is to capture Izuku Midoriya. Their goal is to do that by using Mr. Compressor, who's essentially going to try to use his quirk to capture Izuku so that All for One could pretty much end up taking Izuku's quirk. Unfortunately for them, there's no way in the world that Deku's going to be letting that happen. Just like in the original, Izuku would have his battle against Muscular, and let's just say that that fight is just, it's literally a laughing stock. It's not even funny how unbelievably easy it is. If Deku doesn't want to fight Muscular, all he has to do is teleport this man to the Sahara Desert, and he'll die from literal thirst. Like, that's as simple as it gets. Deku is that busted. If Deku wanted to, he could literally just brainwash Muscular by asking him, "Hey, you know, like, who are you here for?" And Muscular would answer. Like, this dude has a million ways he could take him out. He could even teleport to Aizawa really quickly, cancel Muscular's quirk, and just beat the brakes off of him. Like, it's honestly hilarious how many options Deku has to just absolutely embarrass people at this point. Izuku after this would teleport to where his classmates are at, seeing flames in the forest, and he would see Bakugo and Todoroki facing off against Moonfish. Seeing this, Deku would quickly go on to copy Todoroki's quirk, as he and Todoroki would shoot icebergs at him, and this one would turn into a large, gigantic one that would cover the entire forest area, freezing him in place as they would continue going on and looking for the rest of their classmates. Eventually, they bump into Tokiyami, who would be going crazy with his quirk, to which Deku would go on to, well, he doesn't exactly have the erasure quirk, so he would teleport. Oh no, he has the flame quirk from the half and half, so he'd shoot flames to calm down Tokiyami, and after that would happen, Izuku would make his way towards the direction of where Toga and Uraraka were fighting. Toga, seeing that everybody was now there, would be like, "I'm not dumb, I'm not gonna freaking die today," so she would run away, and Izuku would just kind of let her. He'd be like, I don't care, it's just a girl with a knife, what harm could she do? As Deku would kind of just sit there, and as he has his guard down, Mr. Compress would try to compress Izuku and take him to All for One, but he would drastically fail at this, and Deku would simply open a portal to send Mr. Compress to a different place where he literally has no idea where he is. He sends him to America, bro. Mr. Compress is now there, sitting there with a mask, just wondering how the heck he got here, as he would just kind of facepalm, realizing, yeah, the plan clearly failed. At this point, All for One would acknowledge that this kid is just straight up far too strong. All for One is not dumb, right? he's not gonna like try to face off against somebody that he knows he has absolutely zero chance again. So instead of All For One trying to continue going after Izuku, All For One would decide that he needs to speed up his plans of making Shigaraki his vessel. So All For One and those villains would pretty much just go into hiding, which means that luckily for All Might, we don't end up getting the Kamino Ward fight or the Hideout raid arc or none of that stuff, which means that after these villains would be taken care of, they would actually continue the Forest training camp and would end up just doing the Provisional Hero License arc. Mind you, Bakugo never got captured, so after that we get this meaningless arc that Deku passes. I mean, there's no stakes, right? We definitely don't get the Deku versus Kachan fight too, because I mean, come on now, bro. Deku's gonna wash this man. We've already seen it happen one too many times. And right after that happens, we're gonna be getting the Shei Hisaki arc, which is where Izuku's actually gonna be meeting Mirio, which Izuku would actually bump into a quirk that he would be so sad he can't copy. Because mind you, remember how in the original Mirio goes on to fight like Class 1A? It'd be something like that. Anyways, let's just skip to that day. The class would start and Deku would pretty much make his way to the classroom as he would be having a couple of conversations with his classmates when suddenly Izuku out of the corner of his eye would see somebody pretty much phasing through the floor as he could see like a smiley face on the ground, and Deku would be like, what the heck is that? At this point, Mirio would say, hey, as you know, he would go on to introduce himself to Izuku and say that All Might's told him a lot about him. As Izuku would say, I bet he has. And Mirio in this timeline would have one for all. As Mirio would go on to pretty much explain who he is and tell the class that he's grateful for the opportunity to be able to mentor them a little bit. As he would go on to explain to them that the best way to do that is to show them. As they would make their way towards like a little arena where they can fight, or like a class gym or something, like a really big gym, where Mirio goes on to decimate everyone, bro. This dude doesn't even use one for all. He literally just uses base strength. And Izuku seeing that would just be like, that's an incredible quirk. He would try to use it, but realize that he can't. As he would turn to Aizawa and just give him the look of, dude, let me use your quirk. Aizawa at this point would just kind of nod as he uses his quirk for a second, and Deku copies it, turning towards Mirio. As he would get closer and closer and closer, as he would stare at Mirio using the quirk, and one for all, and his permeation quirk would instantly deactivate. Mirio at this point would be sent to the surface completely naked, as Deku would say, checkmate, and he would tap Mirio on the chest as Mirio would let out a laughter and say, you got me, kid, as he'd go on to explain that all the things he's heard about him are completely true, saying that he's probably going to be the #1 hero, but if there's someone who could beat him, it's definitely Izuku. That being the case, we'd essentially get a scene in which Mirio and Deku would kind of like, they become pretty cool like buddies, you know what I mean? As Bakugo is pretty much just faded into all irrelevancy. Like there's nothing the dude's gonna be doing. I don't see him becoming a villain. Like I just don't see that happening. He still becomes a hero. And with that being the case, we would finally get the internship. I think because of the bromance that Mirio and Deku would develop, he'd still go to overhaul the Sir Night agency. And dude, like, sure, Izuku can't exactly get the ability of using a quirk that's going to allow him to, what's the word I'm looking for, to permeate and to phase through things. But if he can have a quirk that allows him to see into the future, to pretty much peer into how battles are going to go, then that's just going to make his life a lot easier. So Izuku would copy his quirk in place of Shinso's mind control quirk, or sorry, Aizawa's erasure quirk. And now Izuku would pretty much have an arsenal of Kurogiri, right? Let's just recap. Kurogiri, an erasure quirk, and one for all. With that being the case, they make their way towards a patrol, and during said patrol, Eri would still bump into them like in the original. Deku, looking at this girl, would wonder why the heck she's so injured, as Izuku would use the Night Eye quirk on her, and finding out what happens with overhaul, he would literally be like horrified. He'd be like, I can't believe that's what he would do to you. As Deku, seeing the future if he would have let her go, would be appalled by this. Overhaul walking out would say, hey, that's my daughter. As Deku just looks at him, bro, erases his quirk, and proceeds to just like stare at him with like a death stare as he punches Overhaul into a trash can, smashing his body into it and stuffing him into it. As he would then teleport Warpgate the trash can into a police station and Warpgate himself in there alongside Aries. He would look at her, smile, holding her shoulders and say, "Look at me. That man is never gonna hurt you again." As Aerie would start crying, her horn would start to actually like light up because of the excitement, and she would use her quirk on Izuku. Mind you, she has a quirk he can copy. Izuku feeling himself like getting reversed on some of the quirks that he had used before, and Sir Nida specifically would feel that one leave his body. As he now gets brainwashed again, he lets Aerie go and he copies her quirk with him saying, "You can rewind things?" Izuku would look at her and say, "Your quirk is awesome." He's dapping her up and he tells her he promises he's going to help her train with this quirk. As Izuku would wonder what he could do with it, but the first thing that would come on his mind is, "I can heal people." Izuku instantly would like teleport to All Might as he would go on to heal his injury that he's had forever, and then teleport to Ida secondly, as he would heal him and his brother Tenya, or no, not Tenya, but something, his older brother, pretty much. As you know, Ida returns to Class 1A. He's so grateful to Izuku, and with Izuku having this power, not only is Izuku able to rewind other people but himself. This is the one of the last perfect quirks. Now Deku is a hero who has the abilities of One for All, which allows him to be a juggernaut, and the stronger his body gets, the more he could use the ability. When he uses the upper limits of One for All, his eye strain gets increasingly like you could see his veins in his eyes and stuff like that. But he has Rewind, which allows him to perfectly use One for All at its max capacity at all times. And he has Kurogiri's teleportation quirk for instantaneous movement and switching of quirks. Rewind to heal himself. Say someone literally does blow a hole in his chest, Rewind. He's a perfect hero. He's a perfect hero. I don't want to hear it. If you guys think that anyone in the My Hero Academia verse could even stand a Deku, comment it down below. I will debate you. The only person that could maybe beat him is Mineta at this point, if we're being honest, but that's a stretch even there. But ladies and gentlemen, like you guys probably expected, with Deku getting to a point where there's literally no challenge for me to make and no other really plot points for me to cover, I think that this is a perfect spot to leave the story. Let me know what you guys thought about this down below in the comments. It is late. Now it's officially 2:45 a.m. Yeah, I ended up recording and pausing and fixing errors and looking things up quite a while. So please do me a favor and leave a like down below for me for making this video for you guys late at night, and for making sure that not only am I providing you guys with videos again, but I've been dropping a couple movies lately. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Xehther, and I am out. Peace.